Hello everyone, my name is Slegaitis-Smith. If you are old hat, welcome back. If you're brand new, welcome you. This is a channel where we like to talk about writing, learning, and creating. And right now we are in an editing series where I am covering several different ways you can approach editing your work in progress. Today we're going to be tackling the bookfold method. This method isn't so much about what you do to your actual page as much as the mindset and the framework that you use when you approach your editing. So the goal of this method is to get you to step back from your computer and step back from looking at your text the way you have been looking at it previously and seeing it in a way that is a little bit different. And the way that that is accomplished is by using a bookfold. Now, when you have an actual book that you've bought that you're looking at, there are actually many different sections in that book, different segments of pages. And essentially what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be creating one small segment of a book that we're going to be using to help us look at our work. Now, the upsides to using this method include the fact that you're able to spend some time away from the computer, as well as you kind of get to have that feeling like you're looking at a proof copy of your book, because when it's printed out in the bookfold way, it looks how it will look like on the page of an actual printed book, like when your work is done. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a feel for what your book is going to look like in its final formatting stage, as well as giving you a different way to look at how to edit your story. This is all about making sure that you can get into a new mindset, a fresh mindset, and to feel good about what you're doing while you're doing the work, because a lot of us don't have a positive feeling with editing. So hopefully this bookfold technique will be fun and engaging for you, as well as helping you to get on to your editing. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing that you are going to be doing is you're going to be taking a section of your work, whether it's a full chapter or just a segment, and you are going to be putting it into a Word document. When you put it into the Word document, you then need to go to Layout and then click this little arrow down in the corner here for Page Setup. Once that opens up, you're going to be looking at the pages and multiple pages setting in order to change this into bookfold. So you're going to click the little arrow for the drop down, click on bookfold, click OK, and you'll see that the format for the chapter has completely changed. It's now set up to print two sections of the chapter on each side, and if we get our printing setting right, it will actually work back to back, that when you stack the pages together, they will actually be in the proper order. So then you're gonna go to File, Print, and instead of printing one-sided, you are going to print on both sides. And you want to be careful to make sure that you pick that you are flipping on the short edge, because otherwise you'll have your text printing upside down on one side and right side up on the other. So click the print on both sides on short edge. Then just print it. Don't grab it. Xander. We have our printed bookfold. This is my page one. You could have put in a title page if you wanted to. I forgot to even think about that. So it's not an issue though. We're still good to go. What you're gonna do is wherever your front page is, whether you put a title page or not, you're gonna flip it over so that you're looking at what will be the middle of your text. If you have page numbers on it, it's really helpful to make sure that all your pages are in the right order. Otherwise, you have to actually look at your text to make sure that it's all correct. You are going to be putting that all together, making sure that it all lines up. And step number one is to simply fold your pages in half so that it's in the book format. All right, we are folded in half. So now we are going to be starting to get into the binding process. what you are going to want to do is there's a couple of different ways that you can make sure these pages stay together. The most common one is to use a stapler. So here's my stapler. It is able to open so that I can have one side available to use and the other side out of the way. If you have a stapler that is capable of doing this, you can use the first stapling method that I'm going to show you. If your stapler cannot open like this, then you're gonna have to use a different method. Hang on with me for just a minute. So with our beautifully creased pages, we're gonna make sure that we're once again in the middle of our booklet. Then we are going to be flipping it over, and you're gonna wanna make sure that you are on a nice hard surface if you're gonna do it this way. And you are going to start in the middle and try to staple through. If you're on a desk like I am, it's not going to work. That didn't quite get the whole way through because it is too hard of a surface. Hi, Sander. I'm trying to film, bud. So what is recommended to do is to use a carpeted surface. And I tried doing this once, and let me just show you the results. It is all hardwood, so the only carpeted surface I have is this cat tree here. So let's staple this bookfold. That went in. Ooh. Oh. Uh-oh. Whoops. Don't worry, I was able to get the staple out of the cat tree. It's perfectly safe for the cats. The problem with using the cat tree is that the surface underneath the carpet was not hard enough, so you need something more like the density of the desktop with the carpeted surface on top for that to work. But if you don't have a surface like that in your house that you can use, or if your stapler does not open, what you can do is just staple as close to the edge as possible. Your stapler might even have a little helpful like arrow notch like this one does to show you exactly where the staple is coming out of the stapler, and that can be really helpful for making sure you put it in the right place. So we're just going to make sure that our pages are all together where we want them to be. I'm going to be trying to go as close to the edge as I can, as straight as I can. Keeping in mind where that arrow is, and then... Oop, I was a little too close to the edge. Round 2. As close to the edge, as straight as possible. Boom. So that's really close to the edge. You're not going to have like a crazy fold in the middle to worry about. So it still works pretty well. It just won't work if you have like a pretty thick section. You want to work on smaller sections. But if you don't have a stapler, if you don't want the hassle of it, you can actually use a more traditional bookbinding method in order to bind this bookfold. And that is what I'm going to show you next. Alright, so for the traditional bookbinding method, you are going to need a few things in order to actually pull this off. A lot of the stuff can be substituted for, some of it can't. So I'm just going to show you what that is real quick. So you're going to want something like these binder clips or a more heavy-duty paper clip, depending on how big of a bookfold you have, in order to make sure that the pages stay secured where they need to be. You're going to need an awl, a book awl, in order to get a hole through your pages so that you can thread some thread through it, because what we're going to be doing essentially is sewing the book together, which is how books are all really made. They're made with a sewn pattern, which also leads to you will need some kind of thread. The only thread I have in the house right now is my actual like book binding thread, so this is wax thread, but you can just use regular thread. We don't need to be too fancy because it's not like we're trying to actually make a book that we want to stand the test of time, which is what wax thread is for. So you're going to need that, and then you are also going to need a needle that you can use, and there's several different types of needles that you can use. You could use a traditional sewing needle, or you can use, I'm pretty sure that these are traditionally used for suturing, they're suture needles, but these actually are for bookbinding as well, where they're a curved needle. You can use a straight needle or a curved needle. These are just the ones I have on hand at the moment. All right,
So step number 1 is to put a surface down that you're not worried about getting too damaged. I am big on substituting things for what I don't have. So I don't have like what you would use like a cutting board for crafts or anything like that at home right now. So I have this really dense notebook that is already pretty scratched up on one side, so I don't care if I dent it a smidge. So I'm going to be using that. And then your first step is going to be making sure that you have your pages held in place. So you're going to once again just make sure all your pages are nice and lined up, and then you are going to be taking your paper clips or your binder clips, whatever you have to use, and you're going to be putting them on one side and the other side to make sure that your pages will stay where you need them to, so that it stays nice and straight as you're doing all of your work. So there we go. That is step 1 complete. We have our pages held together. Step number 2, you are going to need a ruler and pencil for. So what you're going to do is on your fold line, you're going to line up your ruler, there we go, so that it's right on that fold, because that's where we're going to be doing our sewing. What we're doing now is we're going to be marking out dots for where we need to make holes in our page to do our sewn binding. So what you're going to want to do is go by inch distances. So make a dot at 1 inch, make a dot at 3 inches, make a dot at 5 inches, and then make a dot 1 inch in from the bottom of your page. So 5 inches, is the, yeah, just make sure it's nice and clear. All right, so we're gonna have 4 dots. We're gonna be making 4 holes. If you want to make something more sturdy, you would do more holes in this, but once again, we're not trying to make something that's gonna stand the test of time right now. We're just trying to get a book fold to put together so we can actually edit the writing on the pages. So we're not going crazy. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take your awl. If you do not have an awl and you don't want to go out and buy one, you can do this with a needle. It's just going to take you a lot more time and be a little bit more difficult. So what you're going to do is put the point of your awl on your dot, stand it up so that it's in the right position, and then you're going to be pressing and twisting the awl. If you have an actual mat behind it, you could even potentially use a hammer to do this instead of just pressing and twisting, but trying to stick with minimalness. And then you just lift up the page a little bit to make sure that it goes through. And I know you can't see it because I drew with black, but there's now a hole there. And then you're just going to do that for each of the other dots you made. All right, now that we have all of our holes made, we are ready to start the sewing, which means it's time to prep our needle and thread. So first we're gonna measure out our length of thread. So this is the thread that I'm using for today. What you're gonna do is use your book to help be a measuring rod. You're gonna want double the length of your book, and keep in mind that your thread is going to be folded in half. So what you're gonna do is put the thread at the very top of your page and then bring it down to the very bottom, pinch, move again, measure again, pinch, move again, measure again, pinch, move again, measure again, and that's where you're going to cut. All right, now that we have our length of thread, it's time to get out one of our needles to start our sewing. I'm going to use one of our smaller ones. And then if you have a needle threader, it can be nice to not have to fight with your needle at all. So if you have a needle threader, it looks like this, and it has like this wire. And what you do is you put that through the eye of the needle. You put your thread into the threader. And then you pull and wiggle the thread through the eye of the needle. There you go. and then you just finish pulling the one side through. Voila, nice and easy threaded needle. Then you're just gonna put your ends together, tie them into a little knot. You'd want a very serious knot if you wanted this to last, because we're not concerned about it lasting. We are also not concerned as much about this knot. All right, and now we're gonna get started. So what we're gonna be doing is essentially, if you're more familiar with sewing, we're gonna be doing the back stitch. There is actually a technical term for this particular form of bookbinding, but I don't remember what it is. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that your knot ends up on the outside of your book. And this is because if we were doing like an actual book, you would have that then on the inside seam, which you would then be covering. So you're gonna start by going through your top hole. So you're gonna go through your top hole and pull until you reach the knot. Pull gently to make sure that the knot is right there, but you don't want to pull too hard that you pull through your paper. And then you're actually going to be looping over the top and going back through that same hole. Make sure you keep your thread taut, nice and tight. There we go. And you just want to pull to the point where your thread is fully against your page, but not so hard that you're starting to like actually bend the page. If you start seeing your page crimp a little bit, you're a little much. You're okay. All right, so next, our thread is on the inside. So what we're going to be doing is going in through our second hole. Once again, make sure that your thread all stays in the right place. We're down through our second hole, flip over to the other side, and we're gonna go back in through that first hole. This is where it's like the back stitch. So we're going back to the hole we started with. We're gonna go through that hole, and then we are going to hop over down to the third hole, back stitch to the second hole, go down to the fourth hole, back stitch again. Once we've finished our stitching, we can take our clips off because our book fold is finished. Just need to fold it back over. Boom. And we got our nice threaded edge here. Nice and simple. You can cut off your extra tassel at the end just to make sure. And then your finished product is a full book fold. And now we are ready to start editing. The actual editing part of this is just going to be the standard editing like we talked about in the first video. But once again, this is a method to help you get away from the computer, to help look at your book more like it would look like as a book without actually having to order a proof copy, which some people do instead. But this lets you like kind of pretend that you have a proof copy. And if you do know bookbinding, you can totally make your own proof. And that could be a really fun project that helps just detox your brain before you actually get into the editing phase of things. So I hope you had fun learning how to do a book fold today.
Thank you ever so much for joining me today on learning this book fold method. I hope that you had some fun looking at some of the different ways that you could make a book fold. If you're particularly interested in the bookbinding aspect from when we did a little bit of that, I can go into more in-depth tutorials for bookbinding, or at least direct you to sources where you can find more bookbinding information that is really good if you found that part of the project very relaxing. So if you're interested in that, you can either let me know down in the comments, or you can hit me up on Instagram in my DMs. That way I know that you would like that information. If you did like the video, consider actually liking the video here on YouTube. If you think that somebody else would benefit from this video, how about sharing it? And if you really enjoy being here and being part of this small family we have, how about hitting that subscribe button so that you can get notified regularly as this series progresses? That wraps it up for today. Have a great one until the next one.